It's a question that feels like it belongs in a movie. Like, could we bring a Neanderthal back to life? Could we see a real, living, breathing hominin who walked the earth 40,000 years ago? The idea captures the imagination. It's a mix of incredible science and deep, complicated questions about who we are. The simple answer is no, not today. But the real answer is much more interesting. It's a story about what's possible, what's difficult, and what might be a terrible idea. First, let's get the science straight. How would you even begin to clone a Neanderthal? The way we clone animals now, like Dolly the sheep, is called somatic cell nuclear transfer. It sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. You take a living cell from the animal you want to clone. You pull the nucleus out of that cell. The nucleus is the part that holds all the DNA, the complete instruction manual. Then you take an egg cell from a donor animal and remove its nucleus. You pop the new nucleus into the empty egg. A little jolt of electricity tells the egg to start dividing, as if it's been fertilized. You now have an embryo. You implant that embryo into a surrogate mother, and if everything goes right, a clone is born. This method has a huge non-negotiable requirement. You need a living cell. Or, at the very least, a perfectly preserved, intact nucleus with a complete set of undamaged DNA. And that is our first and biggest roadblock. We don't have any living Neanderthal cells. We don't have any frozen ones in a lab somewhere. All we have are bones and teeth dug out of the ground in caves and ancient riverbeds. They are thousands of years old. The DNA inside those bones is a mess. When an organism dies, its DNA starts to break down immediately. It's attacked by water, by microbes in the soil, by background radiation. Over 40,000 years, the long, elegant strands of the genome shatter into tiny, random fragments. It's like taking a million-page book, shredding it into single letters, and then leaving a pile of letters in the rain for a few centuries. But scientists, especially people like Svante Pabo, who won a Nobel Prize for this work, have figured out how to piece that shredded book back together. Using powerful computers and clever chemical techniques, they can read those tiny DNA fragments. They can identify and filter out all the contaminating DNA from bacteria and from the humans who handled the bones. Then, they can line up the authentic Neanderthal fragments against the reference map of a modern human genome. It's a massive, painstaking jigsaw puzzle. After years of work, we now have a reference Neanderthal genome. This is an incredible achievement. It's a blueprint of sorts, but it's not a perfect blueprint. It's a composite, an average, stitched together from different individuals, from different places, and different times. It has gaps, it has uncertainties, it's not the single pristine set of instructions from one individual that you would need for traditional cloning. So the Dolly the sheep method is out. It's a complete non-starter. This is where the new technology comes in. The plan would have to be different. Instead of cloning, we would be talking about genetic engineering. The tool for the job would be something you've probably heard of: CRISPR. CRISPR is like a find and replace function for DNA. It allows scientists to go into a living cell's genome and make precise edits. They can cut out a specific gene and paste in a new one. So the new plan, the futuristic plan, looks like this. You start not with a Neanderthal cell, but with a modern human cell. A stem cell would be a good choice, because it has the potential to develop into any part of the body. You take this human stem cell and put it under a microscope. Then, using our reconstructed Neanderthal genome as a guide, you start editing. You would have to compare the human genome and the Neanderthal genome base pair by base pair. There are millions of differences. We're very closely related, but not identical. The job would be to use CRISPR to go into the human cell's DNA and change every single base pair that is different, one by one, until the human genome has been converted into a Neanderthal genome. You'd be turning a human cell into a Neanderthal cell on a genetic level. This is where the scale of the problem becomes clear. We're not talking about one or two edits, we're talking about tens of thousands of them, at least. The number of genetic differences between us and Neanderthals is still being debated, but it's substantial. Doing this perfectly, without making any mistakes, without accidentally breaking something important in the genome, is a challenge far beyond our current capabilities. Our find and replace tool is good, but it's not perfect. It can make off-target edits, changing things it wasn't supposed to. One wrong edit could be catastrophic, leading to a fatal disease or a developmental problem. And which differences do you change? All of them. What about the genes we share with Neanderthals that are linked to diseases like cancer or diabetes today? Do we edit those to be healthier, or do we create an authentic Neanderthal, risks and all? Do we even know what all the genes do? We don't. We know what some of them do, but huge stretches of the genome are still a mystery. We'd be editing blind in many places, hoping for the best. We would be building something without fully understanding the blueprint. Let's imagine, for a moment, that we solve all those problems. Let's say in 50 years, we have perfect gene editing technology. We have a complete flawless Neanderthal genome sequence. We successfully edit a human stem cell, and for all intents and purposes, we have created a viable, healthy Neanderthal cell in a petri dish. What's next? A single cell is not a person. You need to make that cell grow into an embryo. You could do this using the cloning technique from before. You would take a human egg, remove its nucleus, and insert the nucleus from your newly created Neanderthal cell. You would then stimulate it to divide and grow. If it works, you have a Neanderthal embryo. Now comes the biggest biological and ethical hurdle of the entire process. That embryo needs a womb to grow in. There are no Neanderthal mothers. The only option would be a human surrogate. A modern human woman would have to agree to carry a Neanderthal fetus to term. The risks here are staggering, and they are mostly unknown. Neanderthals and modern humans evolved separately for hundreds of thousands of years. When we could interbreed, we were different. Neanderthals were more robust. They had wider bodies, wider hips. A Neanderthal baby would likely have a larger head and a sturdier body than a modern human baby. Would a modern human mother be able to carry and deliver such a child safely? The differences in pelvic shape alone could make childbirth incredibly dangerous or impossible without major surgery. And the risks go deeper than just mechanics. A pregnancy is a complex biological conversation between the mother and the fetus. The mother's immune system has to be carefully managed so it doesn't attack the fetus as a foreign invader. The fetus's placenta has to successfully integrate with the mother's uterus to get nutrients. Would a Neanderthal fetus and a human mother be compatible? The proteins and genetic signals they use might be just different enough to cause a catastrophic failure. The mother's immune system might reject the fetus. The placenta might not develop properly. The pregnancy could end in miscarriage, or it could endanger the life of the surrogate mother. Asking a woman to take on these profound, unknown physical risks for a scientific experiment is an ethical minefield. No ethics board in the world would approve such a thing today, and rightly so. The well-being of the living, breathing human surrogate has to come first. Some people suggest a workaround. Maybe we could use an artificial womb. The technology called ectogenesis is in its infancy. Scientists have managed to keep premature lambs alive in fluid-filled bags for a few weeks. It's an amazing proof of concept, but developing that into a system that can support a primate, let alone a human, from embryo to birth is a monumental leap. It's pure science fiction at this point. An artificial womb would have to perfectly replicate the temperature, pressure, nutrient flow, hormonal signals, and immune protection of a real womb for 9 months. We are nowhere near that. So for the foreseeable future, a human surrogate is the only option. And that option is, for now, a non-starter. But let's keep pushing the thought experiment forward. Let's say we do it. We find a willing surrogate. The science works perfectly. The pregnancy is managed successfully, and a baby is born. A healthy Neanderthal baby. What then? This is where the scientific questions fade and the human questions take over. And they are brutal. We would have brought a person into the world, not a specimen, not a curiosity, but a thinking, feeling human being. And we would have brought them into a world where they are utterly and completely alone. They would be the only one of their kind on a planet of 8 billion of us. What kind of life would that child have? From the moment of their birth, they would be the most famous person on Earth. They would be under constant observation. Every burp, every step, every word would be recorded and analyzed by scientists. Every moment of their life would be a data point. Privacy would be a meaningless concept. They would be hounded by media, by scientists, by governments, by the public. How would we raise them? Do scientists in a lab raise the child to ensure the experiment is pure? That sounds monstrous, a recipe for profound psychological damage. So, do we give the child to a loving family to raise? How could any family protect them from the crushing weight of being the world's only Neanderthal? They would go to school and look different from every other child. They would be stronger, perhaps. Their face would be shaped differently. How would other children treat them? How would society treat them? Would we see them as one of us or as something other? The psychological burden on this individual would be unimaginable. The loneliness. The sense of being an absolute freak. Never meeting anyone else who looks like you, who thinks like you, who shares your deep biological heritage. We know from history how cruelly humans can treat other humans who look just slightly different. How would we treat someone who is fundamentally biologically different? And what about their rights? Would they be granted full human rights? Would they be a citizen of a country? Or would they be considered the property of the corporation or university that created them? A patentable invention, the legal battles would be endless and ugly. We have no framework for this. We would be making up the rules as we go, and the life of a real person would be at the center of it all. This individual could not consent to their own creation. They could not agree to bear the burden of being a living experiment, a symbol, a scientific breakthrough. We would be making that choice for them, and that is a moral line that many people believe we should never cross. To create a person for the primary purpose of studying them is to treat them as a means to an end, not as an end in themselves. It's the ultimate objectification. Then there are the biological unknowns for the child itself. Their immune system evolved in a Stone Age world filled with different bacteria and viruses. They might have no natural defense against modern illnesses like measles or the flu. A common cold could be deadly. We might be able to protect them with vaccines, but we can't know for sure. Their diet and metabolism were adapted for a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. What would a modern diet of processed foods do to their body? We would be guessing, and if we guessed wrong, the consequences would be paid by the child in the form of chronic illness and suffering. We are talking about knowingly creating a life that is almost certain to involve profound suffering, both physical and psychological. And for what? What is the upside? The scientists who support the idea would say the potential for knowledge is immense. By studying a living Neanderthal, we could answer some of the deepest questions about our own evolution. How did their minds work? Did they have language? How was it different from ours? What are the key genetic changes that made Homo sapiens so successful? We could study their physiology, their immune system, their development. We could understand what it truly means to be a modern human by seeing what we are not. This knowledge, they would argue, is fundamental. It's about understanding our own origins. But is that knowledge worth the cost? Is our curiosity a good enough reason to inflict that life on a person? Many ethicists and many scientists would say a firm no. The potential harm to the individual is so great and so certain that it outweighs any potential knowledge we might gain. The welfare of the person must come before the pursuit of knowledge. The debate also opens up a bigger can of worms. If we can bring back a Neanderthal, what's next? Homo erectus? Woolly mammoths? Saber-toothed cats? The idea of de-extinction is gaining some traction, especially for keystone species like the mammoth that could help restore an ecosystem. But bringing back an animal is one thing. Bringing back a sentient, self-aware being with complex thoughts and emotions is something else entirely. It's in a different moral universe. Creating a Neanderthal would blur the line of what it means to be human. It would force us to confront our own definitions and our own prejudices. It would set a precedent. Once that door is opened, it can't be closed. The technology to edit human-like genomes would advance rapidly, and it would be used by someone somewhere, perhaps for less noble reasons than pure scientific curiosity. So, where does that leave us? The science to clone a Neanderthal, or rather, to engineer one, is not here yet. The technical hurdles are still massive. We can't edit a genome with the necessary precision. We can't guarantee a safe pregnancy. We can't create a viable embryo with any certainty. It will likely be decades, if not longer, before the science is even remotely plausible. But the technology is moving forward, and fast. So the ethical questions are not just hypothetical. They are real, and we need to talk about them now. The conversation is important. The debate forces us to think about the responsibilities that come with scientific power. It forces us to think about what we value more, knowledge or compassion. In the end, the question might not be, could we clone a Neanderthal? But, should we? Based on what we know now and the profound, unavoidable harm it would cause to the person created, the answer has to be no. The desire to see one in a zoo or to study one in a lab is a reflection of our own curiosity. But it is not a good enough reason to create a life of guaranteed suffering and loneliness. Maybe the best way to honor the Neanderthals is not to resurrect them. Maybe it's to study their bones and their DNA with respect, to learn what we can from the traces they left behind, to tell their story, and in doing so, to learn more about our own story and to make better choices for the future of the hominins that are still here, the ones we have a responsibility to care for, us.